The Thing That Woke Me Up, Part 2. The figure was standing in the corner of the kitchen, watching, waiting, and somehow smiling. The room felt wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was trying to breathe underwater. Caleb stared straight ahead at his cereal. Mom stood frozen beside the laundry basket. Dad sat motionless at the table with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Even the refrigerator had gone silent. The clock above the stove had stopped ticking. Everything had stopped. Only the figure moved. Slowly it tilted its head. One long arm began to rise. Its hand opened toward me, waiting, inviting. And then, for the first time in every dream I'd ever had, I heard a voice. Not Caleb's, not mine, not the figure's, my father's. Dylan. The kitchen vanished. Dylan. The darkness shattered like glass. Dylan, wake up. I opened my eyes. Sunlight poured through my bedroom window. My father stood beside my bed with a fishing rod balanced over his shoulder. He grinned the same grin I'd seen 1,000 times before. You ready or what? For several seconds I couldn't move. The dream clung to me like spider webs. The kitchen, the silence, the figure, Caleb's warning. Every second of it felt more real than the room around me. Dad nudged my foot. You planning on sleeping all day? I blinked. The smell of coffee drifted upstairs. Somewhere down the hallway, Caleb sprinted past my room before immediately slamming into something and bursting into laughter. Normal. Everything was normal. Yeah, I finally said. Dad smiled. Good, get dressed. As he walked out, he tapped the doorframe twice with his knuckles. Tap, tap, a habit he'd had for as long as I could remember. I listened to his footsteps disappear down the hall before looking toward the corner of my room. Nothing. Empty. Of course it was. I let out a nervous laugh and rubbed my face. The figure was gone. The dream was over. For now. That fishing trip became one of my favorite memories. The entire day felt bright and warm, like the world was apologizing for the nightmare. Dad taught me how to cast farther than I'd ever managed before. Caleb spent half the day falling into mud and pretending it was intentional. We caught fish, told terrible jokes, ate crushed sandwiches from a cooler that leaked ice water everywhere, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. Nothing strange happened, nothing impossible, nothing watched from the tree line. For one perfect day, life was normal, and little by little the dream faded. That was always the pattern. The dreams never stayed. They arrived, terrified me, then disappeared. Days would pass, weeks, sometimes months. Long enough for me to convince myself I'd imagined everything. Long enough to stop looking over my shoulder. Long enough to forget. Then another dream would come. A different place, different people, different conversations, different endings. But three things never changed. The bird, the silence, the figure, always waiting somewhere just beyond where I was supposed to look. When I was 13, I dreamed I was at the county fair. The dream lasted days, at least it felt that way. I rode rides, played games, hung out with friends, ate food that probably violated several health codes. Everything felt normal. Then one evening, while standing beneath the Ferris wheel, a black bird flew overhead. Without thinking, I followed it. The music stopped. Every light at the fair blinked out. The crowd froze. And across the midway, standing beside a dark funhouse entrance, the figure waited, watching. I woke up before it reached me. Dad had dropped a toolbox in the garage. The crash shook the entire house. I remember sitting straight up in bed, drenched in sweat, and for the first time I felt something strange, disappointment. Because the closer the figure got, the more I wanted answers, the more I wanted to know what happened if it finally reached me. That thought scared me worse than the dreams ever had. The years passed, the dreams continued, never predictable, never frequent, just enough to remind me they were still there. At 14, I dreamed I was back in school. At 15, I dreamed I was an adult living in a town I'd never seen. At 16, I dreamed I was driving through a city that doesn't exist. Each dream ended differently. Each dream lasted a different amount of time, sometimes hours, sometimes weeks. Once, what felt like nearly an entire year, but eventually the bird appeared, and eventually I saw the figure, and eventually something woke me up. Every time, an alarm, thunder. Dad calling my name, Mom opening a door, a barking dog, a ringing phone, always something, always before the figure touched me. Eventually I began wondering if that was the point, not the dreams, the waking up, as though something was interrupting them, preventing them from finishing, as though Someone or something didn't want the figure reaching me. Then came the dream I couldn't stop thinking about. The dream inside the dream. I was 15. In the dream, I woke up, or at least I thought I did. Everything looked normal. The same posters, the same dresser, the same carpet. Rain tapped softly against the window. I checked the clock beside my bed, 3:33 a.m. For some reason, the number made my stomach twist. Then I heard someone crying, very quietly. The sound came from inside my closet. I sat up. The crying stopped. Then Caleb's voice whispered from the darkness, "Dylan?" Every hair on my body stood up. "Caleb, can you let me out?" The voice sounded exactly like him. Small, scared, like he'd been trapped in there for hours. I stared at the closet door. Something felt wrong, very wrong, but I couldn't explain why. "Dylan?" The handle rattled softly, just once. "Please." I climbed out of bed. The room immediately felt colder. The rain outside grew louder. My feet touched the floor, and I knew something wasn't right. The carpet was wet, not soaked, not flooded, just damp, like it had been left outside overnight. I looked down. Dark footprints crossed the carpet. Bare footprints, too large, too long, leading from the closet to my bed. My heart stopped. Slowly, I looked back up. The closet door creaked open another inch. "Dylan?" The voice sounded weaker now, more desperate. "Please hurry." I should have run. I know that now. But it was Caleb, or at least it sounded like Caleb. And no matter how scared I was, I couldn't ignore him. I stepped closer. The footprints continued past me, toward the bedroom door, like whatever had made them had already left. The crying resumed, soft, pathetic, childlike. I reached for the closet handle, then froze. Someone was breathing behind me, slow, deep, wet, not human, like air moving through something hollow. I turned. The figure stood beside my bed, so close I could have touched it. Its hollow eyes stared down at me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then the closet door flew open. Inside wasn't a closet, it was a forest. Dark trees stretched endlessly beneath a black sky. Dead leaves covered the ground. Hundreds of black birds stood motionless among the trees, watching, every single one of them facing me. Then Caleb spoke again, but this time his voice came from somewhere deep inside the forest. "Dylan." Every bird tilted its head at the exact same moment. "Dylan." The figure slowly lifted one arm. Its hand opened toward the woods, toward Caleb's voice, toward whatever waited beyond the trees. "Dylan." I took a step backward. The floor disappeared beneath me, and I fell. I woke up screaming. Dad burst into my room, Mom right behind him. The clock beside my bed read 2:14 a.m. Rain hammered the window, exactly like the dream. My chest heaved. Dad sat beside me. "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't, not even close, because for the first time ever I couldn't remember where the dream ended. I remembered falling. I remembered waking up, but there was something between those moments, something missing, a gap, like somebody had cut a piece out of the memory. The harder I tried to remember, the worse my headache became. Eventually I gave up. Dad stayed in my room until I fell asleep again, and that should have been the end of it, except the next morning there was mud on my bedroom floor, one damp footprint right beside the closet door, and underneath my bed I found a black feather, not outside, not in the hallway, in my room. I never told my parents, I never told Caleb, but I threw the feather away and spent the next 6 months pretending none of it had happened. No dreams, no birds, no figure, nothing. For the first time in years I felt normal again. Then, just before my 16th birthday, Caleb walked into my room while I was doing homework. He looked nervous, like he'd spent hours trying to work up the courage to say something. "What?" I asked. He hesitated and then swallowed. "Dylan." Something in his voice immediately made my stomach drop. "What?" Caleb glanced toward the window, then toward the hallway, making sure nobody else could hear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I think I dreamed about him too. My pencil slipped from my fingers. The room suddenly felt much colder. "What did you say?" Caleb looked terrified, and before I could ask another question, the power went out. The entire house dropped into darkness, every light and every sound gone. Then, somewhere beyond my bedroom door, something knocked twice. Tap, tap.